Today we'll talk about how to use lightmix for lighting setup. This tool is used incorrectly pretty often, so let's see how to use this tool to set up lighting fast and easy. To enable lightmix, we first need to go to the Scene tab in Corona and click Setup Lightmix. And make sure to stop your interactive render, otherwise the lightmix button will be inactive. Then click Setup Lightmix. Here we can see various options for grouping, grouping layers, instance lights. All instance lights will be assigned to one group and the rest of the lights to other. Group lights, you should use this option when you have a bunch of point lights in your interior. It's easier to manage them as a group. Next, we have layers and individual lights. If you have many point lights in your interior, or many lights in general, you'll end up having too many layers, and that will slow down your process. Plus, multiple layers use plenty of RAM memory, so make sure to keep that in mind. Let's go for instanced lights. So we'll click Generate and start our interactive render. The render is about to restart. In the meanwhile, we'll go to the Lightmix tab. It's active now. And here we can see all the lights that we have in our scene. There's a common mistake that visualizers often make at this point. So suppose a visualizer makes some changes to a light source. To imitate a situation, let's make the environment light brighter. Increase its brightness to 3 and decrease exposure. And then the visualizer starts interactive render. Why is it wrong? Because when you increase this multiplier in lightmix, you just make the pixels brighter, which decreases the overall quality of your render. It will take you forever to get rid of all this noise. So after setting up lights in lightmix, you need to export those settings to the scene. So you click the scene button, and all lightmix settings get assigned to the lights in your scene. And I'll talk about it later. Okay, what lights do we have? Let's disable all the lights. We have plenty of fake lights here. Rest is our background. You can see how light from the background is reflected in the objects. Next we have Corona Sun. And finally we have a bunch of Corona lights. This Corona light illuminates this corner. This one illuminates these furniture pieces, creating shadows and giving shape to objects. This light shines on the table leg. This one illuminates the plant. And finally, we have the environment light. So what makes lightmix so great is that it allows us to focus on each light individually and see how bright it is. For example, we can tweak the sun settings. We've disabled all the other lights, and now we can set up the sun until we find the best light shadow pattern. It would be faster, performance-wise, to create and set up the sun first, and then proceed to create other lights. But since we're working in lightmix, we simply disable the rest of the lights. Keep in mind that lightmix tends to lag. We can change the temperature of the sun. We can make it warmer or colder. Now let's set up Corona light that illuminates the corner. Let's turn it down a bit. Next, the light that shines on the furniture. Let's make it brighter and colder. Now keep in mind that we can't resize lights in lightmix. And this means that we can make the light softer, for example. In this case, you'll have to set it up directly. Now let's make it a little bit colder. Next, the light that illuminates the table leg. It looks okay. The plant light, we can turn it down a bit. And finally, the environment light. Let's make it slightly dimmer. Then we enable our background light and make it dimmer as well. Okay, and so we're done with the settings. Now we can click the scene button. Now that we're happy with the result. Okay. The light mix settings get assigned to the lights in our scene. Here in lightmix, everything except for the background goes back to default settings. And now we can delete lightmix layers in order to free up our RAM. Once again, lightmix uses plenty of memory. If you have a low performance computer with little RAM, you might start having problems with your final render. Your render will be crashing all the time, so it's better to get rid of lightmix layers once we're done with the setup. So click stop, and we go to render elements, and keeping shift press, select all of our layers and click delete. And it's done. This is how you use lightmix to set up lighting in a fast and hassle-free way. In this video, I'm going to show you a quick way to set up lighting using lightmix. That's right, Vray now has the lightmix tool, and it works the same way just like in Corona. First of all, we need to enable it, then open render setup and go to the render elements tab. Then hit add and look for Vray lightmix. Here it is. We can now start interactive render. And here in the list of layers, we now have lightmix. So we click it and see all the lights that we have in our scene. We can group them by different criteria, just like in Corona. So here we have instanced lights, then we have grouped lights, and if you have multiple point lights that are identical to each other, it's easier to edit them as groups. So we sort them into groups and give a name to each group. For example, you can name one group bathroom lights, another one curtain rail lights, and so on. So we don't have many lights in our scene, so let's go for instanced lights. So be careful with individual lights, because if you pick this option, each light will get an individual render element, an individual layer. And all these layers are going to use plenty of RAM. Same is true for Corona, by the way. Keep that in mind. So we've selected instance lights, and let's disable all the lights and then focus on each of them one by one. Reset refers to self-illumination materials. Self-illumination is background light. We can adjust its brightness. Environment light is inactive because we are using Vray Dome. Here's our Vray Dome. We can adjust its brightness or change its color. So let's make it a bit colder. And so next come fake lights. That's the light that illuminates the plant, the light that illuminates the table, the one that comes from the room, and the light that illuminates the corner, and also the sun. So the best thing about lightmix is that we can set up each light individually without turning off the rest of the lights. So we can do that with just one click. We can see its effects on the scene without having to render the entire image. So lightmix allows us to set up each light fast and easy. So for example, we make the light from the room brighter while turning down the light from the window. So that wouldn't be quite correct, but suppose we need to do that, and for some reason or another. And suppose we like the result that we've got. But the thing is that we don't render the scene just yet. We increase the brightness of some of the lights during post-correction. And if we do the render now, we'll end up with too much noise, which is something we don't want to happen. So we first need to export all of these settings to 3D Max. So in a way that they get assigned to the lights in our scene. And only then we can do the final render. So make sure to keep that in mind. So here we have a button named To Scene. We stop interactive render and click to Scene and then Yes. And our lightmix settings are now rewritten over the current light settings. And it all works the same way in Corona. Here in lightmix, the settings have been reset to default values. And now our scene uses new settings that we've set up in lightmix. We don't need lightmix anymore, so we can just delete that. I'm gonna delete this render element. And by the way, all of our light layers are now displayed here on the list of render elements. We can save them to a separate folder and edit them in Photoshop later.